Victoria Reynolds reached down, grabbed the little girl's backpack off seat 2A, and threw it into the aisle like it was trash someone forgot to collect. It skidded across the carpet and hit the galley wall. 9-year-old Lily Carter made a small sound, not a cry, just a sound, and the whole cabin heard it. Her father didn't shout. He didn't stand up. He pulled out a pen and wrote down 4 names. 5 minutes after that plane pushed back from the gate, it stopped. Doors opened. And every single passenger in first class was ordered off because of what that quiet man in the worn jacket actually was. Before we go on, do me a favor. Tell me in the comments what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels tonight. And if you believe a man's worth isn't measured by his jacket, subscribe to the channel and stay with me all the way to the end. Part 1 starts right now. The first thing Ethan Carter did that morning was check the tickets. Then he checked them again in the parking garage. Then a third time in the security line, holding them up under the fluorescent lights like a man reading a letter from someone who had died. "Dad," Lily tugged his sleeve. "You already looked." "I know. 3 times. 4 if you count the kitchen. Why do you keep looking?" Ethan folded the boarding passes and slid them into the inside pocket of his jacket, the brown one with the frayed cuff and the small burn hole near the elbow that he'd never bothered to patch. "Because your mother used to say a man who checks twice never has to apologize once." Lily thought about that the way 9-year-olds think about things seriously, and for about 4 seconds. "That doesn't explain 4 times. "No," Ethan admitted. "It doesn't." She grinned at him, and he felt the whole 9 years of his life since her birth land on his shoulders at once heavy and good. The truth was simpler than anything he could have said out loud. Those 2 boarding passes represented 11 months of overtime. 11 months of Saturdays under a Cessna's cowling with grease in the creases of his knuckles. 11 months of packing his own lunch instead of buying it, of driving a truck with 214,000 miles on it, because a new one could wait, of telling a 9-year-old, "Not this month, sweetheart, maybe next month," until she stopped asking. Seat 2A and Seat 2B, first class, Meridian Airways Flight 1147, Chicago to Charleston. Charleston because that was where Sarah was from. That was where her mother's house still stood on a street lined with live oaks, and where a small white church held a small brass plaque with her name on it, and where Lily had never once set foot in her entire life. 2 years. 2 years since the phone call, since the hospital corridor with the bad coffee, since the day Ethan Carter learned exactly how much a human being could carry before he had to sit down on the floor of a stairwell and put his head in his hands. He'd promised himself 2 things that year: that Lily would never see him break, and that one day he'd take her home, not in the back of a bus, not in the last row of a red-eye, but properly, up front, where people got treated like people. "Dad, yeah. Are we rich now?" Ethan laughed, a short, surprised bark of a laugh that got a look from the TSA agent. "No, baby, we are not even a little bit rich." "Then how come?" "Because sometimes," he said, crouching down to fix her jacket zipper, "you spend a lot on one thing so you can remember it forever. That's not rich, that's just choosing." "Choosing what?" "Choosing a memory over a bunch of stuff." He stood. "Come on, Gate 12. Gate 12 was crowded and warm and smelled like burnt coffee. Lily wanted to sit by the window and watch the ground crew, so Ethan sat next to her and watched them too, and after a while she noticed he was watching differently than she was. "You're doing the thing," she said. "What thing?" "The mechanic thing, where you look at a plane like it's a person." "It is a person," Ethan said. "Every one of them's a little different. That one out there? Listen." He tilted his head. "That's an auxiliary power unit that needs a bearing looked at. You can hear that. I've heard about 4,000 of them." An older man 2 seats down lowered his newspaper. Big hands, silver crew cut, a ball cap that said USS Coral Sea. 22 years in the Navy, he said. "Aviation machinist's mate. You're right about that, APU." Ethan smiled. "Whereabouts?" "Pensacola mostly, then everywhere else." The man extended a hand. "Walt Boyd." "Ethan Carter. This is my daughter Lily." "Ma'am." Walt gave Lily a small formal nod, which delighted her enormously. "First flight?" "First one ever," Lily said. "We're in first class." "Well now." Walt raised his eyebrows in a way that made it seem like the most impressive thing he'd heard in a year. "That's how it ought to be done. My dad saved up. Lily said, and Ethan felt his ears go hot, and he didn't say anything because he'd learned a long time ago that correcting a proud kid was a kind of theft. Walt looked at Ethan then, just for a second, the look one working man gives another when he understands exactly what 11 months looks like. "Son," Walt said, "enjoy every minute." They boarded first, which Lily found almost unbearably exciting. "We go before everybody. We go before everybody. Even the people in line. Even them." She walked down that jet bridge like a woman entering a ballroom. Ethan walked behind her with her small purple backpack in one hand and his own duffel in the other, and he thought clearly and without any particular drama, "This is the best morning of my life since the day she was born." The flight attendant at the door was young, maybe 26, with a smile that arrived a half-second before her eyes did. Her name tag said, "Danielle." "Good morning. Boarding passes." Ethan handed them over. Danielle glanced down. "2A and 2B. Right this way." "Thank you." The cabin was quiet and cool, wide leather seats 4 across. Lily stopped dead in the aisle. "Dad?" "I know. They're huge." "They are." "Is that a real blanket?" "That's a real blanket." "Can I keep it?" "No." "Can I use it?" "You can absolutely use it." She slid into 2A the window, and Ethan stowed her backpack under the seat in front of her, exactly the way he'd told her twice to do it herself, because that was what fathers did. Then he sat down in 2B, and for about 90 seconds, everything in Ethan Carter's world was correct. Lily pressed her forehead against the window. "You can see the whole airport." "You can." "Is that our plane's wing?" "That's our wing." "Is it strong?" Ethan leaned over and looked at it, a professional look, the kind he'd given 10,000 wings. "That wing," he said, "can hold up more than 3 times what it'll ever need to. It could take a beating you wouldn't believe and keep flying." "How do you know?" "Because that's my job, sweetheart. I know what holds." Lily settled back into the seat, pulled the blanket up to her chin, even though it was 72 degrees, and said in the smallest voice she had, "Mom would have liked this." Ethan didn't answer right away. He couldn't. "Yeah," he said finally, "she would have liked this a lot." Victoria Reynolds came aboard 8 minutes later, and the temperature in the cabin changed. She did not walk. She advanced. Camel coat heels that struck the floor like punctuation, a phone at her ear, and 2 assistants trailing her, one carrying a garment bag, and the other carrying nothing at all except a tablet and an expression of permanent apology. "No, tell him the number is the number. If Halloran wants to renegotiate, he can renegotiate with somebody else's money." A pause. "I don't care what his lawyer says. I've bought and sold 4 companies out from under men like that." Another pause. "Because they blink at him. They always blink." She ended the call without saying goodbye and finally looked up and stopped. Her eyes went to row 2, to the window seat, to the 9-year-old girl under the blanket. Then to the man in the brown jacket with the frayed cuff sitting beside her. Something moved across Victoria Reynolds' face. Not anger yet, something colder and quicker. Recalculation. "Danielle," she said without turning around. The flight attendant appeared instantly. "Ms. Reynolds, welcome aboard. It's always—" "Why is there a man in my seat?" Danielle's smile faltered. "I'm sorry." 2A. Victoria pointed with one finger, the way you'd point at a stain. "I fly this route twice a month. I sit in 2A. I have sat in 2A for 6 years." "Let me just check for you." Danielle looked down at her tablet. Her thumb moved. Her expression did something complicated. "Ms. Reynolds, it looks like you're in 4C today." Silence. 4C. "Yes, ma'am." "An aisle." "Yes, ma'am." "In row 4. I can see if anyone would be willing to—" "You can see." Victoria repeated the words as though tasting them and finding them spoiled. "Danielle, look at me. Do you know what my company spends with this airline annually?" "Ms. Reynolds, $680,000. My people, my board, my clients. I am not a passenger. I am a revenue stream." She smiled then, and it was a genuinely beautiful smile, which somehow made it worse. "Now fix it." Ethan had heard every word. So had everyone in the cabin. So had Lily, who had gone very still under her blanket the way children go still when adults get loud. He put his hand on her knee. "Hey, look at the wing." "Dad, look at the wing, sweetheart." Danielle came down the aisle. She crouched slightly beside row 2, which Ethan noticed the crouch, the softened voice, the technique they teach you for delivering bad news. "Sir, hi. Could I take a quick look at your boarding pass?" Ethan took it out and handed it over. He'd checked it 4 times. He knew what it said. Danielle read it. Read it again. Her jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Everything all right?" Ethan asked. "There may be a reservation issue." "There's no issue. That's my seat. That's my daughter's seat." "I understand, sir. It's just that we're showing—" She stopped, tapped the tablet, tapped it again. "One moment." She walked to the galley. Ethan watched her go, and he watched her pick up the interphone, and he watched her turn her body away from the cabin as she spoke into it, and something old and quiet in the back of his brain woke up and started paying very close attention. Because Ethan Carter had spent his entire adult life around airplanes, and he knew the way you know the sound of your own name, that a confirmed seat assignment does not develop a reservation issue 9 minutes before departure while the passenger is already sitting in it, not by accident. Victoria did not sit in 4C. She stood in the aisle beside it, arms folded, watching row 2 the way a hawk watches a field. Her assistant leaned in. "Ms. Reynolds, we could just—" "Don't. It's a 50-minute. Adam, if I let a 50-minute inconvenience happen to me, I have taught this airline that inconveniencing me is free." She didn't lower her voice at all. "Nothing about me is free." Walt Boyd, boarding with the main cabin, passed through first class on his way back and caught Ethan's eye. He didn't say anything. He just gave a small nod. "I see you, brother." Then Danielle came back and the flight manager came with her. His name tag said G. Hale. He was maybe 50, red-faced, with the particular energy of a man who had been called away from something and intended to solve this in under 90 seconds. "Folks, hi. Gregory Hale, I'm the ground operations manager for this station." He glanced at Ethan's jacket. It was quick. It wasn't quick enough. "We've got a seating conflict here. Can I see that pass?" "You can see it. It says 2A and 2B. I bought them 11 months ago." Sure. Hale looked at it for less than 3 seconds and handed it back. "Sir, here's the situation. Our system's showing a duplicate assignment. When that happens, we go by original issuance, and unfortunately, the original issuance here is showing Ms. Reynolds." Ethan went very still. "Say that again." "Original issuance shows—" "No, say the part where you looked at my ticket for 2 seconds and then told me a story." Hale's smile hardened. "Sir, there's no need for— I paid for these seats in September of last year." Ethan's voice never rose. Not once. That was the thing several people in that cabin would remember afterward, that he never raised his voice. "Confirmation code, I can pull it up right now. Card statement, I can pull that up too. Seat assignment locked at purchase because I paid the fee to lock it. $29 each. I remember because it was almost $60 I didn't want to spend, and I spent it anyway so that this exact conversation would never happen." Hale blinked. "So let's not do the system thing," Ethan said. "Let's do the true thing. Whose name is on 2A?" The cabin was silent. 13 other passengers in first class were now watching openly. Hale looked at the tablet in Danielle's hands. Danielle looked at the floor. "Sir," Hale said, "I need you to move." Lily's hand came out from under the blanket and closed around her father's wrist. Ethan felt it, in years old, and she already knew the shape of adults deciding something about her family. "Dad, it's okay. Are we in trouble?" And there it was. Ethan had been hit in the face once at 19 in a bar he shouldn't have been in. He'd been under a jet engine that dropped 4 inches with his arm inside it. He'd been standing in a hallway when a doctor came out and didn't have to say anything at all because his face said all of it. None of that landed like "Are we in trouble?" He turned in his seat so his back was to Hale, so his back was to Victoria, so that for 1 second there was nobody in the world but the two of them. "Look at me," he said. "Are you looking—" "Yes. We did nothing wrong. Do you hear me? Not one thing. You didn't do anything wrong, and I didn't do anything wrong. Some grown-ups are making a bad choice right now. That's on them. It is not on us." "But they said—" "I know what they said." He tucked her hair behind her ear. "Sweetheart, listen. When people look at somebody and decide what they're worth before they've said a word, that's the smallest thing a person can do, and we're not going to be small back. Okay." Lily's eyes were wet. She nodded. "That's my girl." He straightened up, and when he turned back around, his face had changed, not angry, cleared, like a man setting down a toolbox and picking up a different one. "Mr. Hale." Sir, I really do need... I heard you. I want to ask you something first, and I want you to answer it in front of everybody who's sitting here. Ethan's voice was calm and level, and it carried. Is there anything wrong with my ticket? Hale hesitated. It's a system. That's not what I asked. Is there anything wrong with the ticket I'm holding in my hand? No, sir. The ticket appears valid. Thank you. Ethan nodded once. Second question. Did anyone open my reservation record in the last 15 minutes? Danielle's head came up. It was fast, half a second. But Ethan caught it, and so did an accountant in 3D named Marcus Webb, who would later describe that exact half second to 3 different investigators. I wouldn't have that information, Hale said. You'd have it in about 4 keystrokes. Sir, because here's what I know. Ethan finally stood, and it was noticeable to everybody that he was taller than he'd looked, sitting down, and that his shoulders were the shoulders of a man who lifted things for a living. He wasn't threatening. He just took up his actual space for the first time. A locked seat assignment doesn't unlock itself. Somebody has to override it, and every override in your system leaves a name, a station code, and a timestamp. So if this is a computer error, that record's going to show a computer, and if it's not, he let the sentence sit there. It's going to show a person. Hale's face went from red to a shade nobody has a name for. From the aisle behind them, Victoria Reynolds laughed. It was a light, pleasant, absolutely devastating sound. Oh, for God's sake, she stepped forward. You've made your point. You're very well informed for a... And here she paused, and her eyes went deliberately and unhurriedly from Ethan's boots to his jeans to the burn hole in his jacket sleeve for a man in that jacket. Somebody in row 1 made a small noise. Ethan looked at her for a long moment. You want to say the rest of it? He asked. I'm sorry. You started a sentence and you quit halfway. Go ahead and finish it. There's a 9-year-old right here who's going to hear it either way, so you might as well say it clean. Victoria's chin lifted a fraction of an inch. I think, she said, that some people misunderstand what VIP means. What does it mean by, it means priority? Priority over what? Over inconvenience. Over people, Ethan said. That's what you mean. You just don't want to say it in front of the kid. Sir, Hale stepped between them. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to lower... I haven't raised my voice one time. Ethan didn't look away from Victoria. Ma'am, I want to make sure I understand. You've got a valid seat on this airplane, 4C. Nobody's taking it from you. You'll land in Charleston at the same minute I do. So this isn't about getting there. It's about standards. Whose? Mine, Victoria said. And frankly, whether you like it or not, this airline's. There is a reason there is a curtain between this cabin and that one. It isn't decorative. And that several passengers agreed later was the moment the cabin turned. Because up until then, a number of people in first class had been quietly on Victoria's side, not out of cruelty, out of habit, out of the 1,000 small assumptions that a well-dressed woman with assistance is probably in the right and a tired man in work boots has probably made a mistake. But she said the curtain isn't decorative, and a woman in 1C, a retired schoolteacher named Ruth Alvarez, put down her orange juice and said out loud to nobody in particular, "Good Lord." Hale made his decision. Okay, folks, here's what we're going to do. He clapped his hands once the way men do when they want a conversation to be over. Sir, we've got a seat available in the main cabin, row 28. I can get you a full refund on the fare difference, plus a $200 travel voucher, and I'll personally make sure both seats. I'm sorry. Are you moving both of us to row 28? Hale looked at his tablet. Then he looked at Danielle. Then he did something Ethan would remember for the rest of his life. He looked at his shoes. We have 1 seat available, Hale said. Ethan didn't move. 1. The flight's full, sir. Your daughter can stay right here, and he checked in 2B, and she'll be extremely well looked after. Our crew is, say the rest of it, and you'd be in 28E. 28E. Ethan repeated it flatly. Middle seat, 26 rows back, behind 2 bulkheads and a curtain, from a 9-year-old on her first flight in her life. It's a 52-minute flight. Mr. Hale. Ethan's voice dropped and got, if anything, gentler. Do you have kids? Hale's mouth opened, closed. 2, he said. How old? 6 and 11. Would you sit in 28E? Nobody said anything. That's what I thought, Ethan said. Danielle spoke up then for the first time since the galley. Her voice was thin. Sir, I'd keep an eye on her the whole flight, I promise. I'd sit with her during cruise if I could. And Ethan looked at her, and there was no anger in it at all, which was somehow worse. "I believe you," he said. "I think you'd do that. I think you're a decent person who's about to do an indecent thing because somebody with a title told you to, and you're going to carry it around a lot longer than you think." Danielle's eyes filled. She turned away fast. That was when Victoria took the backpack. Later, she would insist she was simply clearing the seat area. 14 people would remember it differently, and one of them would have it on video. She reached down past Lily, took the purple backpack out from under the seat by one strap, and swung it into the aisle. It hit the galley wall and slid, and a zipper burst, and a small yellow notebook and a plastic horse came skittering out across the carpet. Lily made a sound. Not a cry, just a sound. And the entire first-class cabin of Meridian Airways Flight 1147 heard a 9-year-old girl make a sound she should never have had to make. Ethan moved, not toward Victoria. He stepped past her, knelt in the aisle, and picked up the notebook. He picked up the plastic horse. He put them back in the bag and zipped what was left of the zipper, and he did it slowly, and the cabin watched him do it, and the silence got so heavy you could hear the jet bridge groan outside. Then he stood up and handed the backpack to his daughter. "Everything's here," he said. "Nothing's broken. The zipper's broken. I'll fix it tonight. You always say that." "I always do it," Ethan said, and Lily made a wet little laugh, and Ruth Alvarez in 1C put her hand over her mouth. Ethan turned around. "Ms. Reynolds, I was clearing the—" "I want to tell you something, and then I'm going to stop talking to you for the rest of your life." He said it without heat. That was the frightening part. You didn't just take a seat. Anybody can take a seat. What you did was you taught a 9-year-old that when a person with money wants something, the rules bend. And she's going to carry that. She's going to carry it into her first job interview and her first apartment application and the first time somebody looks at her name and decides something. You put that in her today, for a window seat, on a 52-minute flight. Victoria's mouth was a thin line. "You don't know anything about me," she said. "No, ma'am," Ethan agreed. "I don't." He picked up his duffel. "But I'm about to." I walked back to 28E. That's the part nobody expected, and it's the part that mattered most. He didn't refuse. He didn't demand a supervisor. He didn't get himself dragged off an airplane in a viral video. He knelt down one more time next to 2B, whispered something to his daughter that nobody else could hear, and then he picked up his bag, and he walked 26 rows to the back of the airplane, and he sat down in a middle seat between a college kid with headphones and a woman with a sleeping infant. And he took out his phone. What he'd whispered to Lily was this: "Count to 300 for me. Slow. When you get to 300, look up." She'd asked why. He'd said, "Because I want you to see something." In 28E, Ethan Carter did not open a social media app. He did not call a lawyer. He opened his notes, and he typed in the flat, unhurried way of a man filling out a maintenance log. 0847. Danielle Price, FA. Told twice ticket was valid. Escalated anyway. 0851. G. Hale GND Ops MGR ORD. Reviewed BP approx 2 sick. Claimed original issuance. False. Refused to state override source. 08XB3. Locked seat assignment. 2A altered post boarding. Override required. Station code plus agent ID recoverable. 0856. Passenger V. Reynolds stated annual spend as basis for reassignment. Witnessed by full F cabin. 0857. Minor child separated from sole parent. No unaccompanied minor protocol offered. No consent obtained. 0858. Property of minor removed from seat area by third party. He read it back once. Then he added one more line and he looked at it for a long time before he typed it. I let it happen on purpose. Because that was the truth, and he'd known it since the moment Hale looked at his shoes. He could have stopped it in 11 seconds. 11 seconds and one phone call, and Gregory Hale would have been escorted off his own jet bridge before the boarding music finished. Ethan had known that the entire time. He had sat there with that knowledge in his chest like a hot coal, and he had chosen deliberately with his daughter's hand around his wrist not to use it. Because he'd needed to know. Not whether they'd treat him fairly. He already knew how they treated him. He'd spent 11 months in a workshop in Rockford being called "Hey Buddy" by men who'd have called him "Sir" if they'd known. He needed to know what happened to the man with no leverage at all, the man in the brown jacket, the man with the burn hole in the sleeve, the one who couldn't threaten anybody, couldn't call anybody, couldn't do anything at all, except hold up a ticket he'd paid for and ask in a reasonable voice to be allowed to sit in his own seat next to his own child. Now he knew. The seatbelt sign chimed. Ethan looked out through the gap between the seats in front of him. 26 rows of heads, a curtain, and somewhere past it, a 9-year-old girl counting slowly to 300 with her hands folded in her lap. He hit the call button. The flight attendant in the back, a man in his 40s named Ray, leaned over. "Yes, sir. Everything okay? I need you to get a message to the flight deck." Ray's smile stayed, but his eyes sharpened. "Sir, we're about to push. Anything you need, I can—" "Ray." Ethan turned his phone around so the man could see the screen. "I need you to read this, and then I need you to decide very fast what kind of day you're going to have." Ray read it. His hand came off the seat back. "Sir," he said, and his voice had changed entirely, "would you please come with me to the forward galley?" "No," Ethan said. "I'm not going anywhere. I want it done from right here where 40 people can watch it get done. Tell the captain that." He handed Ray a card from his wallet, plain white, no logo, 11 digits, and nothing else. "And tell him to call that number before we move 1 inch." Ray looked at the card, then he looked at Ethan. Then he went up the aisle faster than any flight attendant has ever walked without technically running. In seat 2B, Lily Carter was at 211. She had her mother's habit of counting on the pads of her fingers instead of the tips. She had her father's habit of not crying where people could see. The blanket was still folded across her lap because nobody had taken it away, and Victoria Reynolds was sitting 1 seat over in 2A scrolling her phone and had not looked at her once. 240. Danielle came down this aisle with a glass of orange juice she hadn't been asked for. "Sweetheart, would you like—" "No, thank you," Lily said. 246. Danielle stopped. "I'm sorry. I'm counting to 300. My dad told me to." Something happened in Danielle Price's face. "Why?" she asked quietly. "Because he said I'd see something." 260. Danielle straightened up slowly, still holding the orange juice, and looked toward the front of the airplane where the cockpit door had just opened. 271. The first officer stepped out. He did not look at the passengers. He walked directly to the forward galley phone, picked it up, and stood with his back to the cabin for 11 seconds. 284. He hung up. He said something to Ray, who had appeared at his elbow. Ray nodded once. 292. The engines which had been spooling spooled back down. The cabin lights, which had dimmed for departure, came back up to full. 298. The jet bridge, which had pulled back from the aircraft door 4 minutes earlier, began with a low mechanical whine that every experienced traveler on that airplane recognized instantly, and none of them could believe to move forward again. 300. Lily Carter looked up. And over the PA, in a voice that was doing an extremely poor job of sounding routine, the captain of Meridian Airways Flight 1147 said, "Ladies and gentlemen, this is the flight deck. I need everyone to remain seated. We are returning to the gate." Victoria Reynolds's head came up from her phone for the first time in 11 minutes. "What?" she said. Nobody answered her. Down the aisle, 26 rows back, a man in a brown jacket with a burn hole in the sleeve unbuckled his seatbelt and stood up. The man in the brown jacket did not run. That was the first thing Ray noticed walking 3 steps behind him up the aisle. 42 rows of people were craning their necks, and the engines were winding down, and the jet bridge was groaning back into place, and Ethan Carter walked up that aisle at the exact same pace he'd walked down it. "Sir," Ray said quietly, "I want you to know the captain's still on the phone." "Good. He's been on it about 90 seconds. That's about right?" "Sir." Ray hesitated. 15 years of doing this job had given him a very fine instrument for measuring what was about to happen in a cabin, and the needle was buried. "Sir, can I ask what that number was?" Ethan didn't slow down. "Not yet." At row 20, a woman leaned into the aisle. "Excuse me, are we deplaning? I've got a connection in Charleston." "I don't know, ma'am." "Well, do you know what's happening?" "Yes, ma'am," Ethan said. "I do." He pushed the curtain aside with the back of his hand. First class had turned into a different country in the 11 minutes since he'd left it. Gregory Hale was standing in the forward galley with his tablet held against his chest like a shield, talking fast and low to a gate agent who had come aboard and was shaking her head. Danielle Price was standing at the door with her hands at her sides, not doing anything at all, which for a flight attendant is the loudest possible statement. Victoria Reynolds was on her phone in 2A with her legs crossed and her voice pitched to Carrie. "No, they've stopped the aircraft, yes. Stopped it. Adam, I want you to call Bergstrom's office directly, not the assistant, the office." And in 2B, a 9-year-old girl was sitting perfectly straight with a broken purple backpack in her lap, looking up. Ethan crouched in the aisle beside her. 300, Lily said. 300. The plane went backwards. It did. Dad? Her voice wobbled for the first time. Did we get in trouble? No, sweetheart. He put his hand over her small folded hands. Somebody else did. Hale saw him then. Sir? He came out of the galley at a speed that suggested he'd been waiting for a target. Sir, you need to sit down. You are not permitted to be in this cabin. You have been reseated. Ethan stood up slowly. Mr. Hale, you've been reseated to 28E and I need you to return to... Why is the airplane at the gate? Hale's mouth worked. That is an operational matter. It's an operational matter. Ethan nodded like a man being handed a part number that didn't match the box. Okay, then let me ask you an easier one. About 10 minutes ago you told me the original issuance on seat 2A was Ms. Reynolds. Do you still want to say that? I'm not going to litigate. It's a yes or a no. Sir, I have a departure to run. You don't, Ethan said. Not anymore. That's what the gate coming back means. Something shifted in Hale's face. He was a man who had spent 19 years learning that a raised voice and a badge and a clipboard would end almost any conversation on an airplane, and he was at that exact moment discovering the outer edge of that. So he reached for the last tool in the drawer. Denise, he called to the gate agent, get me the duty officer. We've got a disruptive passenger refusing crew instruction. The cabin heard it. Ruth Alvarez, the retired schoolteacher in 1C, took her reading glasses off. Oh, absolutely not, she said. Ma'am, this doesn't concern... I taught 4th grade for 31 years, young man, and I know a lie when it's told at volume. She turned in her seat to face the rest of the cabin. Did anybody here hear that man raise his voice? Anybody one time? Silence. Then from 3D, a soft, dry voice. He never raised it once. Everyone looked. Marcus Webb, 44, forensic accountant, gray sweater, the sort of man airlines never notice. He had his phone and his hand screen up, and he lifted it slightly so Hale could see it. I've been recording since the backpack, Marcus said. That's 4 minutes and 11 seconds of continuous video. He never raised his voice, he never obstructed the aisle, and he complied with a crew instruction that I would very much like somebody to explain to me the legal basis for. Hale's jaw set. Sir, recording crew members is against... No, it isn't, Marcus said. It's against your policy, which is not a law, and your policy also says a confirmed seat can't be reassigned for revenue tier preference, and I'd like to talk about which of your policies we're taking seriously today. Somebody in row 1 laughed. It was not a friendly laugh. Victoria lowered her phone. This is absurd, she said. May I say something? Ma'am, Hale started. May I say something? She stood up. She was very good at standing up. I have flown this airline 400 and some times. I have never not once asked for anything I was not entitled to. I asked a question at the door. One question. Everything that has happened since then has been the decision of your employees, not mine. If your people made an error, that is your people. I did not touch a keyboard. That's true, Ethan said. Every head in the cabin turned. I'm sorry, Victoria said. You didn't touch a keyboard. Ethan looked at Hale. He did. Or somebody standing next to him did. That's what I've been trying to get on the record for 20 minutes, and every time I ask, I get a word like issuance or operational. He turned back to Victoria. You didn't change anything, ma'am. You just made it clear what you were worth, and then you stood in the aisle and let somebody else do the arithmetic. That's a very poetic accusation. It's not an accusation, it's the whole business model. Victoria's eyes narrowed. Meaning, what exactly? Meaning, nobody in a company ever tells an employee to break a rule for a big customer, Ethan said. You don't have to. You just make sure everybody knows who the big customer is, and then you look the other way when the rule breaks by itself. Then when it comes apart, you get to say exactly what you just said. I didn't touch a keyboard. For a moment, half a second, no more, something flickered behind Victoria Reynolds's face that was not anger, then it was gone. "Who are you?" she said. "A guy who fixes airplanes." "No," she said. "You're not." The duty officer arrived 4 minutes later, and his name was Sergeant Dale Kowalski, airport police, 26 years on the job, and he came up the jet bridge expecting exactly what he'd been told. He was getting a hostile passenger in the forward cabin who'd refused reseating and was making threats about lawsuits. What he found was a full first-class cabin sitting in dead silence, a flight manager sweating through his collar, a little girl holding a broken backpack, and a man in work boots, standing calmly in the aisle with his hands visible and open at his sides, the way people do when they've thought about it in advance. Kowalski had been doing this long enough to read a room in under 3 seconds. "All right," he said. "Who called me?" "I did." Hale stepped forward fast. "Gregory Hale, ground ops. This passenger was reseated for a documented reservation conflict, refused to remain in his assigned seat, returned to a cabin he isn't ticketed for, and has been intimidating my crew." "Uh-huh." Kowalski looked at Ethan. "Sir, you want to give me your version?" "I bought seats 2A and 2B 11 months ago. My daughter's in 2B. 20 minutes ago, I was told there was a system conflict and moved to 28E. I complied. I got up when the aircraft returned to the gate because my 9-year-old was sitting alone up here and I wanted to be next to her." "That's it. That's it." Kowalski looked at Hale. "That's it. That's a selective." "Sergeant." Ruth Alvarez raised her hand like she was still in a classroom, except she was the one calling on people. "May I?" "Go ahead, ma'am." Everything that man just said is true, and he left out that the woman in 2A threw the child's backpack down the aisle and broke it. Kowalski's chin came up half an inch. "Somebody threw a kid's bag." "I moved an obstruction," Victoria said. "It was under the seat," said Marcus Webb, "where the FAA requires it to be, on video." Kowalski exhaled slowly through his nose, which anybody who had ever worked with him would have recognized as the sound of a very long shift getting longer. "Okay," he said. "Mr. Hale, walk me through the reservation conflict." Hale glanced at his tablet. "It's a system-generated duplicate." "Fine. Show me the duplicate." "It's the record's been updated, so show me the record then." Hale didn't move. And that was the moment several people noticed it independently, and all of them mentioned it later, that Danielle Price, 26 years old, 3 years with the airline, stepped forward from the aircraft door where she had been standing very still for 11 minutes, doing nothing at all. "I can show you the record," she said. "Danielle." Hale's voice was a warning. He asked to see the record. "Danielle." She held out her tablet to the sergeant, and her hand was shaking so hard the screen wobbled, and she said it anyway. At 8:49 this morning, seat 2A was showing E. Carter locked at purchase with a paid seat lock fee. At 8:53, the assignment was overridden and reissued to V. Reynolds. The override was entered from Station Terminal ORD F14, which is the podium at Gate 12 under supervisor credentials. She swallowed. "Mr. Hale's credentials." Nobody breathed. And at 8:55, Danielle said, a status flag was added to Mr. Carter's record. It says, "Pax voluntarily accepted downgrade." Ethan Carter closed his eyes for 1 second. Not in surprise. He'd known. He'd known since 28E, since the coal in his chest, since he'd typed, "I let it happen on purpose." But knowing a thing and hearing it read out loud in a quiet cabin are two different animals, and the second one has teeth. "I never said that," he said. "I never signed anything. Nobody asked me." "I know," Danielle said. "I was standing right there." "Who entered that flag?" Danielle looked at the screen, then at Hale, then at the floor. "Same credentials," she said. Kowalski took his hat off, which for him was a fairly extreme gesture. "Mr. Hale," he said, "I'm going to ask you one time in front of witnesses, and I'd think about it real carefully. Did you enter a note in a federal air carrier record stating that this man consented to something he did not consent to? That's a standard operational annotation. Yes or no? You don't understand how the system—" "It's not complicated," Ethan said quietly. "He wrote down that I agreed. I didn't agree. That's the whole thing. It's a notation. It's a document." Marcus Webb hadn't raised his voice either, and somehow that was becoming the tone of the entire cabin, everyone speaking softer and softer, while the thing at the center got louder. I do this for a living, Mr. Hale. When there's an incident, that's the record that gets pulled. That note isn't housekeeping. That note is the entire defense of your company in a claim, and you wrote it about a man who was sitting 26 rows back, holding his phone. Hale's tablet was trembling. I have a station to run. We had a 9-minute delay building. I made a call. You made a call, Ethan said. Yes, I made a call. That's my job. You make 100 calls a day, and half of them are ugly, and you pick the one that gets the airplane out the door. And which door was I standing in front of? Hale stopped. Say it, Ethan said. Because I've been standing here 25 minutes, and nobody in a uniform has said the true sentence out loud, and I would like somebody to say it before we go one step further. What was the actual reason you moved me? The cabin waited. Gregory Hale, 49 years old, 2 kids aged 6 and 11-19 years with Meridian Airways, a man who had once driven 40 miles in an ice storm to bring a lost wheelchair to an 80-year-old woman's hotel because he couldn't stand the thought of her waking up without it, stood in the aisle of a stopped airplane and heard himself say, because she was going to make a phone call and you weren't. Ruth Alvarez made a small sound. That's it, Hale said, and his voice cracked open. That's it. That's the reason. Okay? She spends $600,000 a year, and she knows 2 vice presidents by their first names. And you had a paper ticket sleeve and a kid in a jacket. And I have had 4 escalations this quarter and 1 more, and I'm on a plan, and I looked at both of you, and I did the math in about 6 seconds, and I picked the one who couldn't hurt me. Nobody said anything for a long moment. Then Ethan said, "Thank you." Hale looked up, wrecked. "Thank you. That's the first honest sentence I've heard on this airplane." Ethan's voice had no cruelty in it at all. "And it's going to matter later. Remember that you said it." Victoria Reynolds had been quiet for 3 minutes, which for her was a geological era. "May I make an observation?" she said. "Ma'am, I'd sit down," Kowalski said. "I'll stand." She smoothed her coat. "Everyone in this cabin is currently enjoying a very satisfying story. The heartless rich woman, the noble working man, the little girl. It's tidy. I understand the appeal." "Ms. Reynolds, but I want to point out something since we're being honest." She looked around the cabin, and her eyes stopped at nobody in particular, which was the trick of it. "Not one of you said a word." The temperature dropped. "For 20 minutes, she said, that man stood there with a valid ticket and a child, and 13 of you sat in these seats and watched, and every one of you knew. You knew when the manager wouldn't answer his question. You knew when they offered him 1 seat instead of 2. And you all found something extremely interesting in your magazines." She let it sit. "You're angry at me. Fine. But you were comfortable right up until the moment it became fashionable not to be. So let's not pretend there are 12 heroes and 1 villain on this airplane. It landed. That was the terrible part. It landed hard, and several people looked at their hands, and then a voice came through the curtain from the main cabin. "She's right." Everyone turned. Walt Boyd was standing in the gap of the curtain in his USS Coral Sea cap, holding the seat backs on both sides, the way a big man does when an airplane isn't moving, but his knees don't know that. "Sir, you need to stay in the 22 years Navy," Walt said. "I know how to stand in a corridor." He looked at Victoria. "Ma'am, you're right. And you're the last person in the world who's got a right to say it, but you're right." Then he looked at the cabin. "I was in the boarding lounge with this man. He told me his wife passed. He told me he'd been saving 11 months. And when they walked him back past row 28, I saw him go by, and I thought about it. I thought that's not right, and I told myself somebody else would handle it." He took his cap off. "I'm 68 years old," he said, "and I sat there." Ruth Alvarez was crying quietly and furiously, the way people cry when they're mad at themselves. "I moved my knees," she said. "That's all I did. When he walked past, I moved my knees so he could get by, and I said, 'Excuse me,' to him." "Ma'am," Ethan started. "No." She held up a hand. "No, don't you dare be gracious about it. I taught children for 31 years that if they see something wrong, they say something, and this morning I said, 'Excuse me,' and drank my orange juice." Lily tugged her father's sleeve. "Dad?" "Yeah, baby. Why is everybody sad?" Ethan crouched down beside 2B again. The whole cabin could hear him, and he didn't try to stop them. "They're not sad, sweetheart. There's something worse. They're embarrassed." "About what?" "About the part where being quiet felt like being polite." Lily thought about it. "Were you quiet too?" And there it was again, the kid finding with absolute unerring instinct the exact soft spot under the ribs. "Yeah," Ethan said. "I was." "Why?" He glanced up. 14 adults were waiting for the answer to a 9-year-old's question. "Because I wanted to know how bad it was," he said. "Sweetheart, if I'd stopped it in the first minute, I'd have found out how they treat me. I already know that. I wanted to know how they treat somebody who's got nothing to hit back with." He tucked her hair behind her ear. "And that means I let it happen to you a little longer than I had to. And I'm going to be sorry about that for a while." Lily looked at him with those enormous, serious eyes. "Did you find out?" "I did." "Was it bad?" "It was bad," Ethan said. Denise, the gate agent, came back up the jet bridge fast, and she came in without knocking on anything. "Sergeant, Mr. Hale." She was pale. "I need okay." "Okay, so the station manager isn't taking it. It's gone above the station." Hale blinked. "Above the above Bergstrom. Way above Bergstrom." "What does that mean?" "It means I got a call from a 302 area code," Denise said, "and the man on it said the words, 'Hold the aircraft, hold the crew, hold the gate, nobody leaves.' And then he said something about a compliance hold, and then he asked me to confirm the spelling of your name twice." The blood went out of Gregory Hale's face like a plug had been pulled. "Twice. Twice." Danielle put her hand over her mouth. Victoria Reynolds turned very slowly toward the man in the brown jacket. "Who did you call?" she said. "I didn't call anybody," Ethan said. "I gave a man a card and asked the captain to dial it." "Whose card?" "Mine." "You said you fix airplanes." "I do fix airplanes," Ethan said. "That part was true. What's the rest of it?" And Ethan Carter looked at her for a long moment, and everyone in that cabin later swore they saw him decide something. "Ma'am," he said, "in about 10 minutes, some people are going to walk through that door, and I'd rather you heard it from them than from me. Because if I tell you now, you'll think this was a trap. And it wasn't a trap. I didn't want any of this. I wanted to sit next to my kid." "That's not an answer." "No," he agreed. "It's not." The next 11 minutes were the strangest of Danielle Price's life. Nobody deplaned. Nobody was allowed to. The captain came back on the PA twice, saying nothing at all in the calmest voice available to man. In the main cabin, phones came out and stayed out. Somebody in row 19 figured out that flight on 1147 was showing a status code that nobody could remember seeing before and posted it. And by 9:40, there were 200 people on the internet arguing about what a Meridian compliance hold was. Danielle stood in this galley and poured a cup of water she didn't drink. Ray came in beside her. "You okay?" "No." "You did the right thing." "I did the right thing 40 minutes late." She set the cup down. "Ray, I looked at his ticket. I read it. It said 2A, and I walked to that phone and I called Hale, and you know why? Because she scared you. Because I did the math." Danielle's face crumpled and reassembled. "Same math Hale did. 6 seconds. She's a name, he's a jacket. And I knew. I knew when I crouched down next to him and used the voice. You know the voice, the one we use for the bad news. I used the crouch and the voice on a man who hadn't done anything, because that's the technique for making somebody accept a thing they shouldn't have to accept." Ray was quiet. "And then he looked at me," she said, "and he told me I was a decent person about to do an indecent thing, and I'd carry it longer than I thought." She laughed horribly. "It's been 40 minutes. "Danielle." Ray put his hand on the counter, not on her. "What do you want to do?" "I want to go tell that little girl I'm sorry." "Then go." "She's 9. It's not her job to forgive me." "No," Ray said. "It isn't. Go anyway." So she did. She walked down and crouched in the aisle by row 2 and stopped herself and stood back up and knelt instead, because she was never going to use that crouch again as long as she lived. "Lily." Lily looked up. "My name's Danielle. I'm the one who took your dad's ticket." Her voice was steady for exactly 4 words. "I read it. I knew it was right. And I did the wrong thing anyway, and it made your first flight into this, and I am so sorry." Lily considered her. "Are you going to get fired?" "Probably." "Because of me?" "No," Danielle said fast and hard. "No, sweetheart, not because of you, because of me." Lily nodded slowly. Then she held up the purple backpack. "The zipper's broken," she said, "but my dad fixes things." Danielle made a sound that was mostly not a laugh. "Yeah," she said, "I'm getting that." Victoria Reynolds made 4 phone calls in those 11 minutes, and not one of them went the way it was supposed to. The first was to Adam, who was already in a car and already had bad news. The story's out there's video. Somebody in 3D uploaded 4 minutes of it, and it's got 60,000 views. The second was to her communications director, who said the word optics 9 times. The third was to a Meridian vice president whose direct line she'd had for 4 years, and it went to voicemail, which had never once happened before. The fourth was to her daughter. That one she hadn't planned. Mom, Claire Reynolds, 28, a pediatric resident in Denver, who answered on the 4th ring, sounding like she'd been asleep for 90 minutes after an 18-hour shift. Is everything okay? Yes, fine. Everything's fine. Okay, then why are you calling at 9 in the morning? Victoria opened her mouth and discovered to her absolute astonishment that she did not have a sentence ready. There's a situation on a flight. Are you hurt? No. Is the plane okay? The plane's fine. Mom. A rustle. Claire sitting up. What's going on? There was a seating error, Victoria said, and I handled it badly. A long pause on the line. How badly? There's a child, Victoria said. The pause got longer. Mom, Claire said, and her voice had changed. Did you do the thing? What thing? The thing you did at Aspen. The thing you did to the girl at the front desk in Zurich. The thing where somebody in a uniform is standing there and you make it very clear how much you're worth. That's not, did you do it in front of a kid? Victoria Reynolds sat in seat 2A, a seat that was not hers on an airplane that was not moving in front of 13 people who were not looking at her and were also not looking anywhere else and said nothing at all. Okay, Claire said quietly. Okay, I have to go back to sleep. Call me when you land. Claire. Mom. Her daughter's voice was tired in a way that had nothing to do with the shift. You know what the worst part is? I wasn't surprised. Not for a second. The line went dead. Victoria lowered the phone very slowly and set it face down on the armrest. 2 feet away, a 9-year-old girl was showing a broken zipper to a flight attendant. At 9:52, the sound of the jet bridge door changed. Everybody heard it. Airplanes have a small vocabulary of sounds, and this was one of them, and it meant somebody had come through the outer door and was coming down. Kowalski put his hat back on. Denise stepped out of the way. Hail, and this was the detail Marcus Webb's video would capture, and the internet would replay 4 million times. Gregory Hale straightened his tie. Footsteps. More than 2 people. Nobody talking, which was somehow the worst sign of all. Danielle stood up from beside row 2. Walt Boyd, still in the curtain gap, muttered, "Here we go." And the door filled. 4 people came aboard. A woman in her 60s in a navy suit with a laminate on a lanyard that read Meridian Corporate. A younger man with a laptop bag and the particular gray complexion of someone who had been on a conference call since 9:04. A woman with a legal pad. And behind them a tall man with white hair and a scar on the back of one hand who did not have a laminate at all, because in 31 years nobody at that company had ever once asked him for one. The woman in navy scanned the cabin fast the way people do when they've been given a name and no face. "I'm looking for," she started, and the white-haired man stepped past her, looked down the aisle and stopped. He looked at the man in the brown work jacket with the burn hole in the sleeve standing beside seat 2B with his hand on a 9-year-old's shoulder. And he said out loud in a voice that carried the whole length of first class, "Oh, hell." Nobody moved. "Ethan," the white-haired man said, "Son, please tell me you weren't on this one." Gregory Hale turned his head very slowly. Victoria Reynolds looked up from the armrest, and Ethan Carter said, "Hey, Mac? Yeah, I was on this one." "Hey, Mac? Yeah, I was on this one." For about 3 seconds, nothing happened at all. Then Thomas McAllister, 68 years old, president of Meridian Airways, 41 years in the industry, 31 of them at this company, a man who had personally signed off on the purchase of every aircraft in the fleet since 2009, walked down the aisle of Flight 1147 past 4 executives, 1 police sergeant, 1 gate agent, and 13 paying passengers, and stopped in front of a mechanic in a brown jacket. "Ethan, Mac, is she all right?" That was the first question. Not what happened, not who did this. Mac McAllister looked past Ethan at the 9-year-old in seat 2B, holding a purple backpack with a broken zipper, and he asked if she was all right. "She's okay," Ethan said. Lily. Mac crouched, actually crouched, knees popping like gunshots. You remember me? Lily studied him. You gave me a wrench. I gave you a wrench. For Christmas. That is correct. It was a wrench, Lily said with the profound moral seriousness of a 9-year-old relitigating a 2-year-old grievance. It was a torque wrench, Mac said, and it was a good one, and someday you'll thank me. He looked at the backpack, then at the burst zipper, then slowly at nothing in particular, and something in his face went very quiet. Somebody want to tell me how that got broken? Nobody in first class said a word. Okay, Mac said, standing back up. Okay. He turned around, and the entire cabin got its first look at what a genuinely angry 68-year-old man looks like when he's spent 4 decades learning not to show it. Who's the station manager? Denise raised a hand about 6 inches. He's on his way from Terminal 3, sir. He's on his way, Mac nodded. 22 minutes since the hold went out and he's on his way. All right, who's the ground ops manager? Silence. I've got a name on a piece of paper, Mac said, so this is a courtesy. Gregory Hale stepped forward. His tie was straight. His hands were not. Gregory Hale, sir. Mr. Hale, Mac looked at him for a long moment. You know who I am? Yes, sir. Say it out loud, please, for the cabin. Hale swallowed. You're Mr. McAllister. You're the president of the airline. That's right. Mac turned slightly so that he was addressing the whole forward cabin and none of it. And I want everybody in this section to understand something before we go one step further, because in about 90 seconds, a bunch of you are going to feel very good about yourselves for being on the right side of this, and I'd like to head that off. He pointed at Ethan without looking at him. That man does not work for me, Mac said. Hale blinked. Sir, I work for him. Somebody in row 1 said what? Victoria Reynolds did not say anything. She had gone completely still in seat 2A, and her hands were flat on the armrests, and she was looking at the man in the brown jacket. The way you look at a word you have read 400 times and have suddenly realized you have been pronouncing wrong your entire life. Mac, Ethan said. Don't. Nope. Mac. I have taken that from you for 2 years, Mac said, and it stops on this airplane. He turned to the woman in the navy suit. Karen Badge. The woman with the lanyard stepped forward and held up a laminate. For anyone who can't see it, Mac said, that says Meridian Airways. Meridian is not a company. Meridian is a subsidiary. There is a holding company above it called Ardent Group, and Ardent owns this airplane, this gate, that jet bridge, my paycheck, Mr. Hale's paycheck, and the carpet you're all standing on. He put his hand on Ethan's shoulder. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Ethan Carter. He is the chairman of the board of Ardent Group. He has been for 2 years. He has never taken $1 of salary for it. He has never had an office. And up until about 11 minutes ago, I was the only person in this terminal who knew what he looked like. The cabin made a sound, not a gasp, something lower and uglier, the sound of 14 people's stomachs relocating at the same time. Danielle Price sat down, not in a seat, on the galley floor with her back against the cabinet in full view of everyone, like her legs had simply been switched off. Gregory Hale said, "Oh my God." "Yeah," Mac said. "Oh my God. Mr. Hale, I told him to." Hale's voice climbed. I told him to sit in 28E. I told him the original issuance. I stood right there, and Mr. Hale, breathe. I have 2 kids. Gregory, Mac's voice cut through it. Breathe. Nobody's firing anybody in an aisle. That's not how this works, and if it were, I'd have been fired in 1994. Hale put both hands on a seat back and breathed, and Ethan Carter stood there in the middle of all of it, with his hand still on his daughter's shoulder, and looked to everyone watching like the most uncomfortable man in the state of Illinois. "Dad," he crouched. "Yeah, baby." "What's a chairman?" 14 adults leaned in slightly. They couldn't help it. "It's a job where you sit in a room 4 times a year," Ethan said, "and a bunch of people who are much smarter than me explain things, and then I ask questions until somebody tells me the truth. Is it a good job? It's a boring job. Is it your real job? No," Ethan said. "My real job's the engines." Lily thought about that. Then she said the thing that Marcus Webb's video caught in perfect audio and that 4 million people would hear within 36 hours. "So you're the boss of the airplane?" "No, sweetheart." "Then what are you the boss of?" Ethan was quiet for a second. "The rules," he said. "I'm the boss of the rules." The woman with the legal pad, her name was Priya Raghavan, and she was Ardent's independent compliance counsel, and she had answered an 11-digit phone number at 9:04 in the morning in Wilmington, Delaware, cleared her throat. "Mr. Carter, I need to establish something on the record before we proceed, and I apologize for the formality." "Go ahead." At 9:03 this morning, this office received a call from the flight deck of this aircraft. The caller relayed a request to initiate a Level 1 compliance hold. She looked up. "Do you understand that a Level 1 hold cannot be requested by a passenger?" "I do." "Do you understand it can only be requested by the chairman, the CEO, the general counsel, or the head of safety?" "I wrote that list," Ethan said. "I know you did, sir. I need you on the record anyway." "Understood. It was me." "Thank you." Priya wrote something. "Then this is now a formal proceeding, and everything said in this cabin, from this moment, is preserved." "Ma'am," Sergeant Kowalski said carefully, "with respect, I've got an open incident here, too." "You do, Sergeant, and I'm not going to interfere with it. I'd only ask that we not remove anybody until we fix the record, because in about 6 minutes it's going to matter very much what that record says." Kowalski considered. "Fair enough," he said. "Ciao. Can I say something?" Everyone turned. It was Ruth Alvarez standing up in 1C with her purse clutched in both hands like she was about to address a school board. "Ma'am, you don't have to," Ethan started. "I'd like to apologize." "You don't owe me." "Not to you." Ruth's chin was trembling. "To her." She looked at Lily. "Young lady, my name is Ruth. When they made your daddy walk to the back of this airplane, I moved my knees so he could get past and I said, 'Excuse me,' and then I read my magazine. And I want you to know that a grown woman who taught 4th graders for 31 years sat 8 feet from you and did nothing, and I'd like to say sorry for it out loud where everybody can hear." Lily looked at her father. "You can say whatever you want, sweetheart," Ethan said. "Or nothing." Lily looked back at Ruth. "Okay," she said. Ruth burst into tears and sat down. "Mr. Carter," Priya again, "I have the record open. Would you like it read?" "Not yet." Ethan stood up. "There's something I want to do first, and I want to do it before anybody in a suit says another word, because after that it stops being real. Sir." He turned to the cabin. "Ma'am, sir, all of you." He put his hands in his jacket pockets. "I want to ask 3 questions. I'm not going to ask them to catch anybody out. I'm going to ask them because I've been in board meetings for 2 years, where these exact questions get answered with a slide deck, and I want to hear them answered by people who were actually standing here." Nobody moved. "First question." He looked at Hale. "Can a paying passenger lose a confirmed seat because somebody else on the airplane has more money?" Hale's mouth opened. "Under policy," he said. "No, sir." "Under practice," long silence. "Yes," Hale said. "How often?" "Sir." "How often, Greg?" Hale's shoulders came down. "Maybe twice a month at this station," he said. "Not usually like this. Usually it's an upgrade shuffle. It's a companion seat. It's little stuff. Nobody screams. Nobody notices. You move somebody who won't call anybody." "Second question." Ethan didn't blink. "Can a 9-year-old be separated from her only parent because a passenger with status wants a window?" "No," Hale said immediately. "No, that one's no. That's not a gray area. That's not even close to a gray area." "Then why'd you do it?" "Because there was one seat," Hale said, "and I had a 9-minute delay and I'd already made the first bad decision, and every bad decision after that was just, it was cheaper than going back and undoing the first one." Priya's pen was moving very fast. "Third question." Ethan's voice changed. It got softer and everyone leaned in. "Somebody in this company wrote in a federal record that I agreed to be moved. I never said a word. I never signed a thing. Nobody asked me." He looked around. "Why does that field even exist?" Nobody answered. "Karen," Max said quietly. The woman in navy stepped forward. "Sir, the voluntary acceptance flag exists because it closes the compensation obligation. If a passenger volunteers, the carrier owes nothing. So the box that says he didn't complain is the box that says we don't have to pay," Karen said. "Yes, sir." Ethan nodded slowly. "That's the whole thing," he said. "That's it right there. We built a button that turns a person's silence into their consent. And then we hired people we scare, and then we're surprised when the button gets pushed." "Read the record," he said. Priya read it. She read it flatly without drama, which made it 100 times worse. At 0841 seat 2A on Meridian 1147 was assigned to passenger E. Carter, purchased 11 September of last year, seat lock fee, paid status, locked, confirmed. At 0843 seat 2B passenger L. Carter minor, same purchase, same lock, linked companion flag active, which under Policy 12 prohibits separation of the linked pair without written parental consent. Victoria Reynolds's head came up at Policy 12. At 0849 Terminal ORDF 14 opened the record. That's the podium at Gate 12. Whose credentials? Kowalski asked. Supervisor G. Hale. At 0851, the linked companion flag was manually cleared. At 0853, seat 2A was overridden and reissued to passenger V. Reynolds. A pause. At 0855, a status annotation was entered on Mr. Carter's record reading in capital letters, PAX voluntarily accepted downgrade. Same credentials, Danielle said from the floor. Same credentials, Priya confirmed. And at 0858, the compensation obligation on the record closed automatically at $0. Marcus Webb in 3D made a sound like a man watching a car crash he'd predicted out loud. Say that last part again, he said. The compensation obligation closed at 0. So the paperwork was finished, Marcus said, before he even sat down in 28E. Yes. Before the airplane moved. Yes. Marcus turned to Hale. You cleaned it up faster than you moved him. I didn't, that's automatic. It's automatic because somebody designed it to be, Marcus said. That's worse. That's exactly right, Ethan said. And I'm the somebody. That system got built on my watch. That's what nobody in this cabin has said yet, so I'll say it. I've sat in 4 board meetings a year for 2 years, and I signed off on architecture. I never once read line by line, and this morning I found out what it does to a man in a brown jacket. And the only reason I found out is that the man in the brown jacket happened to be me. Max said, Ethan, don't. You want to say the rest of it, or you want me to? Ethan looked at him. I'll say it, he said. He sat down on the armrest of 1D, which is not a thing chairmen do, and rubbed his face with one hand. 2 years ago in March, he said, my wife got on an airplane in Charlotte. The cabin went absolutely silent. Sarah, she was 34. She'd had a scan on a Tuesday, and she was flying home Wednesday to tell me what it said because she didn't want to tell me on the phone. He looked at his hands. She was sick, and she looked sick. She had a scarf on. She'd lost about 30 pounds by then. And she had a seat in the front of that airplane because her doctor wanted her close to the door, and there was a note on her reservation, and a gate agent moved her to row 31 because a man in a suit wanted to sit with his colleague. Nobody breathed. She didn't fight it, Ethan said. That was Sarah. She never fought anything in her life that wasn't cancer. She sat in row 31 for 2 hours and 40 minutes, and she got off that plane and she was gray. And I met her at the curb and I said, what's wrong? And she said, his voice caught once and he waited it out. She said, I just didn't have it in me to argue today. Ruth Alvarez had her hand over her mouth. She lived 11 more months, Ethan said. That flight didn't kill her. I want to be clear about that because I've had 2 years to be honest about it, and I'm not going to start lying in an aisle. That flight didn't kill my wife. But it took a day from her. It took one of her last good days, and it made her feel like a piece of furniture somebody moved. He looked up. Her father built this airline. Victoria Reynolds's hand went to her mouth. Ray Sutherland, Max said quietly. Started with 2 turboprops and a hangar in Rockford in 1978. I was his mechanic. Ethan was mine. Sarah had the controlling interest, Ethan said. She never wanted it. She was a music teacher. When she died, it went to me and Lillian Trust, and I sat in a room with 9 lawyers who all wanted to know what I was going to do with it. And I told them I was going to keep fixing engines, and they could keep running the company, and I'd take 1 seat on the board and 1 rule. Policy 12, Priya said. We called it the Sarah Rule for about a week, and then legal made us stop. Ethan almost smiled. It's 4 paragraphs. It says a confirmed seat is a contract, not a suggestion. It says status doesn't move people. It says a linked child and parent don't get separated for any reason short of safety. And it says any employee who refuses an unlawful reseating instruction is protected from discipline. He looked directly at Danielle Price sitting on the galley floor. That last paragraph's been in the manual for 22 months, he said. Did you know it was there? Danielle's face was wet. No, sir. Did anybody ever tell you? No, sir. Was it in training? It was a slide, Danielle said. There was a compliance module in the spring, 41 slides. You click through them on your phone. I'm sorry, I don't remember it. Don't apologize, Ethan said. That's my failure, not yours. I wrote a rule to protect people and then I let it get delivered as slide 19 of 41. He turned. Mac. Yeah, slide 19 of 41. I heard it, Mac said grimly. I'm going to hear it in my sleep. Mr. Carter. It was the first thing Victoria Reynolds had said in 11 minutes. She stood up out of 2A, slowly and without any of the sound she usually made. May I ask you something? Kowalski shifted his weight. Priya's pen stopped. Go ahead, Ethan said. You're 10 o'clock. Victoria's voice was strange level, but with something scraped out of it. You have a meeting in Charleston at 10 this morning. Ardent Group Board Conference Room, 4 items on the agenda. That's right. Item 3 is a $200 million regional acquisition. Item 3, Ethan agreed, is Reynolds Vantage Capital. I've been trying to get in front of the chairman of Ardent Group for 2 years, Victoria said. 2 years. I've had 4 meetings with your CFO and 3 with your general counsel, and every single one of them ended with somebody telling me the chairman doesn't take meetings. She laughed. It came out wrong. And this morning I got on an airplane and I saw a man in a work jacket sitting in my seat. It wasn't your seat, ma'am. No, she said. It wasn't. The cabin was so quiet you could hear the jet bridge settling. You knew, Victoria said. When I got on, you knew who I was. I recognized you. You knew we had a meeting in 4 hours. Yes. And you sat there. Yes. Why? And Ethan Carter said the thing that Marcus Webb's phone did not quite catch, and that 11 people in first class heard perfectly, and that 3 of them would repeat for the rest of their lives. Because I wanted to know what you'd do, he said, when you thought I was nobody. Victoria Reynolds put her hand on the seat back. That's not a fair test, she said. No, Ethan agreed. It isn't. It's the only one that works. You let it happen. I did. To your daughter. And that landed. Everybody saw it land. Ethan's jaw tightened, and he took a breath through his nose, and he did not look away. That's the one, he said. That's the one that's going to keep me up. You want to hit me, ma'am? That's the spot, and you found it in about 9 seconds, which tells me everything about why you're good at your job. I wasn't trying to. You were. It's fine. You're right. Ethan's voice was very steady. I had 11 seconds and a phone number, and I sat on my hands and my kid watched her father get walked to the back of an airplane, and I told myself it was for the greater good. And it was. And it was also a thing I did to a 9-year-old so I could win an argument in a boardroom in 4 hours. He looked over at Lily. And she's going to remember it. So there's 2 people on this airplane who did something to that kid this morning. I'm one of them. Nobody said a word. Victoria's eyes were bright and hard. Then we're both... No, ma'am, Ethan said. We are not both anything. And I want to be extremely clear about that because I'd rather you heard it now than from a lawyer. He straightened up. I did something selfish. You did something cruel. Those are not the same animal, and they don't get to shake hands and call it even. I'll answer for mine. And I'll answer for mine, Victoria said. You'll do more than that. Meaning I don't care about your $200 million. Ethan's voice never rose. 14 people would swear to that. Item 3's dead. It was dead the second the backpack hit the wall, and it wasn't a decision, it was just arithmetic. But that's not what I want from you. Then what do you want? Ethan pointed at seat 2B. You threw a 9-year-old's bag down an aisle, he said, and every adult in this cabin watched you do it, and not one of them stopped you, including me. So I don't want your money and I don't want your apology to me. I want you to think all the way to Charleston about how easy that was. Max stepped in then, because he'd been watching Ethan's hands and he'd seen the shake starting. All right, he said. Karen Priya Sargent, here's what's happening in the next 10 minutes, and I want it done clean, because there's 400 people on the internet already, and by lunch it'll be 4 million. Sir, Denise said faintly, it's already 4 million. Mac closed his eyes for a second. Course it is. He opened them. Fine, then let's do it right and let them watch. Karen, this aircraft doesn't move today. Not with this crew, not with this manifest, not with this record. I want 1,147 canceled and recovered on the 1414 with a fresh crew and a fresh operating plan. Sir, that's 181 passengers. 181 passengers, Mac said. Book every one of them on the next available hotel and meal for anybody who misses a connection, and full refund on today's fare. Every seat, front to back. Full refund on front to back, Karen. Karen wrote it down. Second thing. Mac turned to the cabin. Ladies and gentlemen, I have to ask everybody in this forward section to deplane. Somebody said, everybody. Everybody. And I'm sorry, and here's why, and you deserve the real reason and not the announcement version. Mac put his hands behind his back. There are 14 people in this cabin who saw what happened this morning, and there is a police sergeant with an open incident, and there is a federal record that says something that isn't true. If I let you all fly to Charleston and scatter that record stands, and this becomes 14 different stories on the internet, and nothing changes. If you get off this airplane and give 30 minutes to that woman with the legal pad, it becomes a document. And documents are the only thing that has ever once made a company like mine behave. Ruth Alvarez stood up immediately. I'll give her 3 hours. Ma'am, 30 minutes is plenty. I'll give her 3 hours anyway. Marcus Webb was already unbuckling. I've got 4 minutes, 11 seconds of video and a timestamp. Where do you want it? Miss Raghavan, Mac said. Bless you, sir. One by one, they stood up. All of them. Row 1, row 2, row 3, row 4. 14 adults in a first-class cabin filing off an airplane that wasn't going anywhere past a 9-year-old girl holding a broken backpack, and every single one of them, Priya's notes would record this, and so would Marcus's video, every single one of them stopped at row 2 on the way out and said something to her. Sorry, sweetheart. You were real brave, honey. I should have said something. I'm sorry I didn't. Your daddy's a good man. Lily said, okay, 13 times, and then to the 14th, a man in his 70s who couldn't get any words out at all, and just put his hand on the seat back and shook his head. Lily said, it's okay, he's going to fix the zipper. The man had to be helped up the aisle. Victoria Reynolds was the last one standing in the cabin. Ms. Reynolds, Kowalski said, I'm going to need to speak with you separately. About the bag. About the bag. Am I under arrest? No, ma'am. You're going to have a conversation with me in a room with a door, and then a lawyer is going to have a much longer one with you. Kowalski's voice was not unkind. You want my advice? Don't say I moved an obstruction again. Not to me, not to her, not to anybody. 14 people watched. It doesn't work, and every time you say it, it costs you something you're going to want later. Victoria was quiet. All right, she said. She picked up her coat. Then she stopped at row 2, and every person still in that cabin tensed at once. Lily, she said. Ethan moved half a step. He didn't say anything, but he moved half a step, and Victoria saw him do it, and something crossed her face. I'm not going to apologize to you right now, Victoria said to the girl, because you'd have to say it's okay and it isn't okay, and you're 9 and it's not your job to make me feel better, so I'm not going to put that on you. She adjusted her coat. I'm going to do it in writing, to your dad, when it costs me something. Lily looked up at her. You broke my zipper, she said. I did. That was my mom's backpack. Victoria Reynolds stopped breathing. It was hers when she was little, Lily said. Grandma gave it to me. It's the only one. Nobody in the cabin moved. I didn't know that, Victoria said. I know, Lily said. You didn't ask. Victoria Reynolds walked off that airplane without another word, and she did not look at anyone, and Sergeant Dale Kowalski, who had spent 26 years watching people get off airplanes badly, said afterward that in all that time he had never seen someone get smaller in 11 steps. Then it was just the crew, the executives, the sergeant, and the Carters, and Gregory Hale. I was still standing exactly where he'd been standing for 20 minutes, holding his tablet against his chest, and when Mac turned toward him, he flinched like a man expecting a swing. Mr. Hale. Sir, you're relieved of duty pending investigation. You'll be paid. You'll have representation. You'll have a hearing, and you'll have the chance to say everything you want to say. Mac's voice was flat and even. Do you understand? Yes, sir. Give Denise your badge. Hale took the lanyard off over his head. His hands weren't shaking anymore. That was almost worse. He handed it over, and Denise took it, and neither of them looked at each other. Mr. McAllister. Hale's voice was thin. May I say one thing to Mr. Carter? Mac looked at Ethan. Ethan nodded. Go ahead, Mac said. Hale turned. I want to say it in front of the sergeant, he said, and the lawyer and everybody, because I already said the true sentence once today, and I'm not going to walk it back now that it costs me. He took a breath. I moved you because you couldn't hurt me. That's the reason. Not the system, not the delay, not the duplicate. I looked at a man with a kid and a jacket, and I decided he had nothing, and I moved him. I know, Ethan said. I've been doing it for 19 years. I know that too. And Hale's voice broke completely. I've been good at this job. That's the part I can't. I drove 40 miles in an ice storm once to bring a lady her wheelchair. I've got a wall of letters in my office. I'm not, sir. I am not a bad man. No, Ethan said. You're not. Then how'd I get here? And Ethan Carter looked at him for a long moment. 6 seconds at a time, he said. Hale nodded. He wiped his face with the back of his wrist, the way men do when they've decided they're not going to do it with their hands. Sir, for what it's worth, your rule, Policy 12. He looked up. I knew it existed. Priya's pen stopped. Say that again, Max said. I knew it existed, Hale said. I didn't read it. I knew there was a thing about seat locks and linked kids, because it came down 2 years ago, and everybody in ground ops complained about it for a week, and then he shrugged helplessly. We just went back to doing it the way we do it, because nobody ever checked. In 2 years, nobody from corporate ever once pulled an override log at this station and asked why. Nobody said anything. That's the answer to your question, sir, Hale said. You asked how often. Twice a month. And the reason it's twice a month isn't that we're all cruel. It's that in 2 years, not one single person has ever asked. He handed Denise his tablet. I'll be in the break room, he said, and walked off the airplane. Mac McAllister stood in the aisle of an empty first-class cabin and put both hands over his face. 2 years, he said. Mac. 2 years, Ethan. You wrote it. I signed it. We announced it. We put it in the manual. We made a slide. He dropped his hands. And not one person in this company ever pulled a log to see if anybody was following it. Did anybody's bonus depend on it? Mac didn't answer. Did it? No, Mac said. Did anybody's bonus depend on on-time departure percentage at this station? Yes. There it is. Ethan sat down heavily in seat 1D. We told them dignity was the rule, and we paid them for minutes. 9-minute delay. That's what I was this morning. I wasn't a man with a ticket. I was 9 minutes. Priya looked up from her pad. Mr. Carter, I have to ask. You said the acquisition is dead. Do you want that reflected as a board decision or a chairman's directive? Neither. Put it as pending review. Mac's head came up. Pending Ethan, she threw a kid's bag. She did. And you're leaving it open. I'm leaving it open, Ethan said, because if I kill a $200 million deal from an airplane aisle 4 hours after she insulted me personally, then every headline tomorrow says chairman punishes woman who took his seat. And that's a story about me. And I don't want a story about me. He looked up. I want a story about seat locks and override logs and a company that never once checked. Nobody clicks on that, so I'm going to have to make them. Priya wrote pending review. Mr. Carter, Danielle Price had gotten up off the galley floor. Before I know I'm probably done here, and that's fine, and I'm not asking. But there's something you should see, and if I get walked out of here in 10 minutes, nobody's going to look for it. What is it? She held out Hale's tablet. When I pulled your override log, she said, the system showed it in a list, because it groups them, by station and credential. She swallowed. Yours wasn't the only one. The cabin got very quiet. Ethan took the tablet. How many? At this station this month. Danielle's voice was barely there. 19. Max swore under his breath. 19 manual seat overrides on locked assignments at Gate 12 alone, Danielle said. Since the first. Ethan scrolled and stopped. Priya. Sir. Come look at this. She came. So did Mac. So did Karen with the lanyard. 14 days ago, Ethan said. Same terminal, same credential. Locked seat, linked companion flag, cleared passenger, reassigned to row 33. Priya leaned in. Who's the passenger? Doesn't say a name in this view, just an initial and a status code. Ethan's voice had gone very flat. M. Okoye, and the code on the linked flag is UMNRA. Karen's face changed color. What's UMNRA? Kowalski asked. Nobody answered him. What's UMNRA? Unaccompanied minor assisted, Karen said. It's a child traveling with a designated adult who isn't the parent. Grandmother usually. Foster placement sometimes. And they cleared the link, Ethan said. They cleared the link. So somewhere 14 days ago. Ethan said slowly. Somebody sat a kid in row 33 by herself and moved the adult responsible for her and closed the compensation field at $0. And there is no chairman in this story and no video and nobody stopped the airplane. He set the tablet down on the seat. And for the first time all morning, Ethan Carter looked like a man who had been hit. Mac, he said, pull every station, not just O'Hare. Every station in the system, 24 months, every manual override on a locked seat with a linked miner. Ethan, that's every station, 24 months, tonight. That's going to be thousands of records. Yeah, Ethan said, that's what I'm afraid of. They did not fly to Charleston that day. That was the first thing, and it was the thing that mattered most to the only person on the airplane who hadn't asked for any of it. Dad. Yeah, baby. Are we still going? Ethan set the tablet down on the seat beside him and turned around, and for the first time that morning, he didn't have an answer ready. I don't know yet, he said. You said we'd go to Mom's town. I did say that. You said we'd see the church with her name on it. I did. Lily's chin did something small and terrible. Is it because of me? She said. Because I got upset about the backpack. And Ethan Carter, who had faced down a flight manager and a police sergeant and a woman worth $400 million in the space of 90 minutes, without his voice going above conversational, made a sound like somebody had stepped on him. No. He got down on his knees in the aisle. No, sweetheart, listen to me. Look at me. I'm looking. None of today is because of you. Not 1 second of it. He took both her hands. You want to know what today is because a bunch of grown men, including me, built something wrong and then never went back and looked at it. That's it. That's the whole thing. You didn't do anything except sit in your seat and get counted to 300. Then why can't we go? Mac McAllister, standing 4 feet away, cleared his throat. She's got a point, he said. Mac. No, she's got a point, Ethan. Mac crouched down too, which his knees had opinions about. Lily, can I tell you something about your dad? Lily nodded. Your dad is about to do a very stupid thing, Mac said. He's about to spend the next 30 hours in a room with a lot of computers because he found out something bad this morning and he's going to tell himself it's the most important thing in the world and he's going to be right about that. He looked at Ethan. And he's going to miss your first trip to your mother's town and he's going to tell himself that's the price. Mac. And I'm telling you, son, from a man who missed everything, Mac said. That's not the price. That's just the easiest thing to pay. Nobody said anything. How many records? Ethan said finally. Karen's team started the pull 20 minutes ago. How long? Overnight minimum, maybe 2 days. Then I've got 2 days, Ethan said. You've got 2 days, Mac agreed. So take the kid to Charleston. They took the 1414 with the fresh crew. Ray worked it. He'd volunteered over the objections of a scheduler who had never once in her life had a flight attendant volunteer for a recovery leg, and he put the Carters in row 11 main cabin aisle and window because Ethan had asked for it specifically, and Ray had not asked why. Lily fell asleep somewhere over Kentucky with her head on her father's arm and the broken backpack in her lap. Ray came down the aisle with a cup of coffee nobody had ordered. Sir? Ethan. Ethan. Ray set it down. Can I ask you something? Go ahead. You gave me a card this morning with 11 digits on it and no name. I did. I've been flying for 15 years, Ray said. I've had 4 passengers hand me a card and tell me to call somebody. 3 of them were lawyers, and 1 of them was a man who said his brother-in-law was a senator. Ethan almost smiled. How'd that go for him? He deplaned in Milwaukee. Ray leaned on the seat back. Here's my question. You knew that number would stop the airplane. You've known it the whole time you've been flying. How many times have you used it? Once. Once in 2 years. Once ever, Ethan said. This morning. Ray was quiet for a second. Sir Ethan, I've got to tell you, in the back of the airplane we all figured you were somebody the second the bridge came back. But we figured you were somebody who always was. You know, a guy who throws the card around. I know. So why not before? Ethan looked down at his sleeping daughter. Because every time I thought about using it, he said. I could hear Sarah. She'd say, Ethan, you're going to use a phone number to fix a problem that 100 people have and only you can call. And she was right, so I'd sit there and take it. He turned the coffee cup slowly on the tray table. And 100 people kept having the problem anyway, so I guess I was wrong twice. Charleston that evening was 79 degrees and smelled like river water and jasmine. They took a cab to a street lined with live oaks and stood in front of a small blue house with a wraparound porch, and Lily held her father's hand very tightly and did not go up the walk. "That's where Mom lived. That's the room right there," Ethan said, pointing. "Second window, she had a poster of a whale on the wall." "A whale?" "She was a strange kid." Lily laughed, and then, without any transition at all, started to cry, and Ethan picked her up like she was 4 instead of 9, and stood on a sidewalk in South Carolina, holding 58 pounds of grief for about 10 minutes, while the light went orange. "Dad?" "Yeah. That lady said I could have my seat back." "She did. I didn't want it." "I know, baby." "I didn't want to sit there anymore." Lily's voice was wet against his shoulder. "I know it cost a lot of money and you saved up, but I didn't want to sit in it." "Sweetheart." Ethan set her down and knelt on the sidewalk. "That seat wasn't the present." "Then what was—" "You getting to be somebody's kid on an airplane for 52 minutes, he said. "That's what I bought, and they took it, and I'm not going to pretend they didn't. But we're standing in front of your mother's house, and that's the actual thing, and nobody on this earth can take that one." Lily wiped her face with the back of her wrist, exactly the way Gregory Hale had 10 hours and 800 miles ago. "Can we knock?" she said. "There's people living there now." "Can we knock anyway?" Ethan looked at the house. "Yeah," he said. "Let's knock." The audit came back at 4:11 the next morning. Karen called from Wilmington, and her voice had the specific flatness of a person who had stopped being able to feel the thing they were saying. "Mr. Carter, just tell me. 24 months, every station, manual overrides on locked seat assignments." She paused. 11,406. Ethan sat down on the edge of a hotel bed in the dark. "Say it again." 11,406. "Out of how many?" "That's the number I'd like you to hear, second sir. Out of about 41 million passengers." Karen exhaled. "It's a rounding error. It's 0.03%. Legal is already drafting a statement that says exactly that, and I want you to know they're going to be right." "And the linked minors?" Long silence. "Karen." 682, she said. 682 times in 24 months this company manually cleared a linked companion flag and separated a child from the adult they were traveling with. 209 of those involved children under 10. Ethan didn't say anything. "Sir, how many got compensated?" 14. "Out of 682. "The rest," Karen said, "closed at 0. The voluntary acceptance flag was entered in 631 of them. So somebody typed they agreed 631 times. "Yes, sir. About kids. About kids." Ethan looked at the shape of his daughter asleep in the other bed. "Karen, I want you to hear the next thing very carefully because you're going to have to repeat it to 9 lawyers. Go ahead. Nobody at this company is allowed to say the words rounding error out loud. Not in a meeting, not in a statement, not to a reporter, not to each other in a hallway." His voice was perfectly level. 682 is not a rounding error. 682 is a school. He found M. Okoye on the second day. It took Priya Raghavan and 2 paralegals and a phone call to a station manager in Detroit, and what came back was a name and an address and 1 line in an incident log that nobody had ever read. Her name was Grace Okoye. She was 59 years old. She was a home health aide in Redford Township, Michigan, and the child in row 33 had been her granddaughter Nia, age 7, whom Grace had been granted temporary custody of 11 weeks earlier by a family court judge. Ethan called her himself. "Mrs. Okoye, who's this?" "My name is Ethan Carter. I'm with the parent company of Meridian Airways. I'm calling about a flight you took 14 days ago from Detroit." The pause on the line was so long he checked the screen. "Mrs. Okoye, you're calling about that?" "Yes, ma'am." "Nobody called about that." Her voice was careful in the way people's voices get when they've been disappointed by an institution before. "I filled out the form on the website, twice. I got an email that said thank you for contacting us." "I know. I called the number. I was on hold 40 minutes. "I know, ma'am." "And now somebody's calling me." "Yes." 2 weeks later. "Yes, ma'am." "Why?" Grace Okoye said. "What changed?" And Ethan Carter, sitting on a bench outside a small white church in Charleston, with his daughter 15 feet away, reading a brass plaque with her mother's name on it, told the truth. "It happened to me," he said. She told him the whole thing, and it took 22 minutes. She had booked the seats in February. She had paid the fee to lock them because she'd read online that you should, and because Nia had never flown, and Nia had been through 11 weeks that no 7-year-old should go through, and Grace had wanted her to be able to reach over and touch her grandmother's arm at any moment for the entire flight. At the gate, an agent had told her there was a seating conflict. I said there's no conflict. I've got the confirmation on my phone. And she said the system shows what it shows. What did you do? I asked to see a supervisor. And he came over and he looked at my phone for about 2 seconds, Grace said, and he told me the same thing, and there was a line of people behind me, and Nia was holding onto my coat, and Her voice went thin. Mr. Carter, I need you to understand something. I'm 59 years old, and I'm black, and I was standing at a podium at an airport, arguing about a seat with a line of people behind me. You understand what I'm telling you? Yes, ma'am. You don't get to be the person arguing, Grace said. There's a version of that story where I'm the person who made a scene, and that version follows you. So I stopped. You stopped. I said fine. And they put her in 33, and they put me in 17, and I sat in 17 for 2 hours and 11 minutes, and I could not see the top of my grandbaby's head. Ethan closed his eyes. Did she cry? She didn't make a sound, Grace said. That's the part I can't, Mr. Carter. She has learned not to make a sound. That's what those 11 weeks taught her. And I sat there in 17, and I thought they're teaching her again. Right now. On this airplane. They're teaching her that when a grown-up decides something about you, you sit still and you don't make a sound. Ethan put his hand over his eyes and did not say anything for 11 seconds. Mrs. Okoye. Yes. Somebody at that airport typed a note in your file that said you agreed to be moved. Silence. Say that again. There's a field in our system, Ethan said. It says the passenger voluntarily accepted the change. Somebody checked it on your record. And when that gets checked, the company doesn't owe you anything, and the complaint closes, and nobody ever looks at it again. I never agreed to anything. I know. I said fine, Grace said. That's not the same word. No, ma'am, Ethan said. It is not. He flew to Detroit on a Thursday, not on the company plane. There wasn't a company plane. Ethan had sold it 14 months earlier over the objections of 6 board members, and the resulting savings had funded a hardship program that nobody had ever bothered to publicize. He flew coach on the 640, and he brought Lily, and he brought a purple backpack in a paper bag. Grace Okoye's kitchen had a table with 4 chairs and a window with a cracked pane and a refrigerator covered in a 7-year-old's drawings. You didn't have to come here, Grace said. I did, though. You could have sent a lawyer. There's a lawyer coming Tuesday, Ethan said. She's very good, and she's going to explain what the company owes you, and I want you to know I've told her not to negotiate. Whatever the number is, we pay it. And if you want to sue us anyway, you sue us anyway, and I won't take it personally. Grace studied him. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? A suit. I've got one, Ethan said. It doesn't fit. Nia Okoye came into the kitchen sideways, the way small children enter rooms with strangers in them, and stopped dead when she saw Lily. The 2 girls looked at each other for a long moment. Were you on the plane too? Nia said. Yeah. Did they move you? They moved my dad, Lily said. He had to go all the way to row 28. Nia's eyes went wide. They moved my grandma to 17. That's not as far. It felt far. Yeah, Lily said with total understanding. It does. And then because she was 9 and had been given careful instructions and had rehearsed them on the airplane, she held out the paper bag. This is for you. Nia looked at her grandmother. Grace nodded. Inside was a purple backpack. Not new, the fabric had gone soft with age, and there was a small ink stain on the bottom corner shaped like Ohio, and somebody had very recently and very carefully replaced the entire zipper assembly with a heavier one that did not match. It's got a new zipper, Lily said. My dad did it. He's a mechanic. It's from a tent, so it's actually way stronger than the one it came with. Nia turned it over in her hands. It's old, she said. It was my mom's, Lily said. She's dead. She got it when she was little like you, and then I got it, and now it's yours. Grace Okoye put her hand flat on the kitchen table. Baby, she started. It's okay, Lily said. I talked about it with my dad for a long time. He said it was my decision, and I decided. She looked at Nia. It's not because I feel bad for you. It's because a lady grabbed it out of my seat and threw it and it broke, and if it just sits in my closet, then that's the last thing that ever happened to it. So now that's not the last thing. Nobody in that kitchen said anything for a while. Nia put the backpack on. It was too big. She left it on anyway. "Does it still work?" she asked. Lily reached over and zipped it all the way up in one smooth pull. "Better than before," she said. The hearing for Gregory Hale was on a Monday in a conference room in Chicago, and it lasted 4 hours. Ethan did not attend. Priya had been extremely clear about that. "You cannot be the complainant and the judge, sir, not on the same record." And so he sat in a coffee shop on Higgins Road and waited. Mac called at 2:40. "It's done. Tell me." Termination for cause. Falsification of a federal air carrier record, unauthorized override of a locked assignment, and separation of a linked minor without consent. Mac's voice was heavy. He didn't contest a single one of them. None. His rep tried. Hale wouldn't let him. Mac paused. "You want to hear what he said at the end?" "Yeah." They asked if he had a closing statement. He said, and I quote, "I did it. I've been doing it for 19 years, and if you fire me and stop there, you've fixed exactly one guy out of about 4,000. Ethan set his coffee down. "He's right. I know he's right." "Mac, how many others?" "Across the system, on the override logs." A long breath. "We've identified 430 employees who cleared a linked minor flag at least once, 18 who did it more than 20 times. And how many of those 430 are Gregory Hale? Meaning what? Meaning how many of them are decent people who got measured on the wrong thing for 19 years and did 6-second arithmetic 400 times because nobody ever once checked?" Mac didn't answer for a while. "Most of them," he said. "Then we fire 18 and we retrain 412. Ethan said, "and we go after the thing that made them." And I want it on the record that I said the word most out loud, and I meant it, because in about a week there's going to be a lot of appetite for hanging people, and it's going to feel really good, and it's going to fix absolutely nothing. Danielle Price was not fired. That decision took 9 days, 4 meetings, and a formal dissent from Meridian's head of in-flight, who argued reasonably, and Priya wrote it all down, that a flight attendant who escalates a valid boarding pass has failed at the most basic function of the job. Ethan let him finish. Then he said, "How many years, sir? How long have you been with the company?" 26 years. "Have you ever moved a passenger you knew had a valid ticket?" The room got very quiet. "Once," the man said, "in 2011. "What happened?" "A congressman's staffer wanted the bulkhead." "Did anybody discipline you?" "Nobody knew." "Did you tell anybody?" "No, sir." "Did she—" Ethan pointed at the folder on the table with Danielle's name on it. "Because there's a compliance record in front of you where a 26-year-old flight attendant handed a police sergeant a tablet with her own supervisor's credentials on it while he was standing 4 feet away telling her to stop. That's in the file. That's paragraph 3. He closed the folder. "You want to fire the one person on that airplane who did the hard thing and keep everybody who's just never been caught." Nobody said anything. "She's not fired," Ethan said. "And she's not promoted either, because that's a bribe and she'd know it. She gets a final written warning for the escalation because she earned it, and she gets a commendation in the same file for the disclosure because she earned that too. Both. In writing, where every employee can see the whole shape of it." "Sir, that's a mixed message." "That's an accurate message," Ethan said. "You did a bad thing, and then you did a brave thing, and both of them are permanent. That's not mixed. That's just how people work." Danielle read the letter 3 weeks later in a crew lounge in Denver and had to go stand in a stairwell for 10 minutes. Then she went and flew a 4-leg day. Victoria Reynolds's letter arrived on the 23rd day. It came to Arden's registered office in a plain envelope hand-addressed, and Priya opened it because that was the protocol, read it, and then walked it down the hall herself and put it on the table in front of Ethan without a word. It was 1 page. "Mr. Carter, I told your daughter I would do this in writing when it cost me something. Here is what it has cost. I have resigned as managing partner of Reynolds Vantage Capital, effective the 15th. This was not requested by my partners, my board, or your company. I am aware that it will be reported as damage control, and I have instructed our communications office to make no statement contradicting that, because I would not believe me either. I am not writing to ask you to reconsider item 3. I understand it is under review and I would like it to remain under review permanently, which I recognize is not how business is done and is also the only honest position available to me. I have been told by counsel not to describe the incident in writing. I am going to describe one part of it anyway. I did not see your daughter. That is the accurate statement, and it is worse than the one people expect me to make. I did not decide she did not matter. I did not look at her and think less of her. I did not look at her. There was a seat, and there was an obstruction under it, and there was a man I had already classified, and a 9-year-old child was inside the field of my vision for approximately 4 minutes, and I could not tell you today what color her coat was. My daughter is 28. She is a pediatric resident. She asked me on the telephone that morning whether I had done the thing, and I understood immediately what she meant, which means she has been watching me do it her entire life and has a name for it. I am not asking for a response, and I would prefer not to receive one. I would like you to give your daughter the enclosed and tell her it is not a gift, it is a repair. V. Reynolds. Taped inside the fold was a zipper pull, brass small shaped like a horse. Ethan sat with it in his hand for a long time. Sir, Priya said, do you want me to log it as a communication from a party under review? Yeah, log it. He turned the little horse over. And Priya, take out the part about her daughter before it goes in the file. Sir, the protocol is... I know the protocol. Ethan set it down. There's a 28-year-old resident in Denver who's about to get her name in 400 articles because her mother wrote one honest paragraph. She didn't do anything. Take it out. Priya made a note. May I say something not on the record, sir? Go ahead. You could destroy that woman with this letter. I know. She handed it to you. I know that too. Then why aren't you... And Ethan Carter looked out the window for a second. Because the whole thing I've been saying for 3 weeks, he said, is that a person shouldn't be worth whatever the strongest guy in the room decides they're worth. And right now, I'm the strongest guy in the room. He put the zipper pull in his shirt pocket, which means either I meant it or I didn't. The board met on a Thursday in Charleston, in the room where item 3 had been supposed to happen 26 days earlier. 9 people. Ethan sat where he always sat at the end in a chair he'd never once thought of as his. Karen presented the numbers, 11,406, 682, 209 under age 10, 14 compensated. When she finished, a man named Alan Pruitt, 64, 3 decades in transport, the closest thing the board had to a conscience, and also the closest thing it had to a break, put down his pen. Ethan, before anybody else talks, what are you asking for? 4 things. Go ahead. 1. The voluntary acceptance field comes out of the system, not renamed, removed. If a passenger accepts a downgrade, we get it in writing from the passenger with their thumb on a screen, or we owe them the money. That's an 8-figure exposure annually. Yes. Just so we're clear-eyed. We're clear-eyed, Ethan said. 2. A locked seat with a linked minor cannot be overridden by any station-level credential. Not a supervisor, not a station manager. It goes to system ops, or it doesn't happen. That'll cost us on time. Yes. How much? Karen ran it, Ethan said. 11 seconds of average departure delay across the network. Somebody down the table actually laughed. 11 seconds. 11 seconds, Ethan said. That's the whole number. That's what we've been buying with 682 kids. The room went quiet. 3. Station bonus structure. Right now, every ground ops manager in this system is measured on D0 departure percentage and nothing else. And I want a second metric with equal weight, and its compliance override rate, and I want the 2 of them on the same page of the same email every month. Pruitt was writing fast now. And 4. Ethan didn't answer right away. 4 is the one you're going to fight me on, he said. Try us. We publish. Somebody said, what? Every number Karen just read. All of it. 11,406, 682, 209, 14. On our own website in a press release with my name on it before any reporter finds it. 4 people spoke at once. Ethan waited. Ethan! Pruitt held up a hand and the room settled. You understand what you're handing the plaintiff's bar? I do. You understand you're handing it to them for free? I do. Then explain it to me like I'm slow. "There's a woman in Redford Township, Michigan," Ethan said. "She filled out our form twice and called our number once and sat on hold for 40 minutes and nobody ever called her back. And the only reason anybody in this company knows her name is that 26 days ago, the exact same thing happened to a man who could stop an airplane with a phone call." He looked around the table. "There are 681 other people out there. Most of them don't know there's a record. Most of them don't know there's a field with their name on it that says they agreed to something they never agreed to. They'll sue us. Some of them will sue us. All of them will sue us. Then all of them will sue us," Ethan said, "and we will pay it, and we will deserve to. And here's the part I want in the minutes." He put both hands flat on the table. "We are not publishing this because it's good strategy. It is not good strategy. It is going to cost this company more money than anything I have ever put in front of you. We're publishing it because 682 people were told to be quiet, and the only thing that has ever worked in the entire history of anything is somebody finally being loud on their behalf." Nobody said anything. "And if we don't," Ethan said, "then everything I did on that airplane was just a rich guy getting his seat back." Alan Pruitt looked down the table for a long moment. Then he said, "I'll move it." "Second," said a woman at the far end who had not spoken in 90 minutes. It passed 7 to 2. The statement went out on a Tuesday at 6:00 a.m. Eastern, and it did not have a single word of public relations in it because Ethan had personally deleted all of them, and Priya had personally deleted the ones he missed. It opened with the number. It said what the number meant. It said what the field did. It said the company had built a system that converted a person's silence into their consent and had then employed people who were measured on minutes and had never once been asked to look. It said the company had been notified of at least 400 of these incidents through its own complaint channels and had closed them, and had apologized without conditions and without the word if. And then at the bottom, under a heading that just said, "What we owe you," there was a phone number that rang in a room in Wilmington, Delaware, staffed by 19 people, and instructions for anyone who believed they had been moved to write to a single address. By noon, the room in Wilmington had taken 1,100 calls. By Friday, it was 9,000. And on Saturday morning, Ethan Carter was under a Cessna in a workshop in Rockford, Illinois, with grease in the creases of his knuckles and his phone face down on a rolling cart, when a man he'd worked beside for 11 years came in holding a newspaper and said, "Ethan." "Yeah." "There's a picture of you in here." Ethan didn't come out from under the cowling. "Is it a good one?" "It's you in that damn jacket." "Then it's a good one," Ethan said, and went back to the engine. The engine took him another 2 hours because it always did, and when he finally rolled out from under it, the newspaper was still sitting on the workbench where Danny had left it folded to the picture. Ethan looked at it for about 4 seconds. The photo was Marcus Webb's video frozen at the moment he'd knelt in the aisle to pick up a plastic horse off the carpet. You couldn't see his face. You could see the burn hole in his sleeve. The headline said something about a chairman. Ethan turned the paper over so the picture was face down, wiped his hands on a rag, and went back to work. At 4 o'clock, Danny came out to the bay again. "Ethan." "Yeah." "There's about 6 people out front with cameras." "Okay." "And a guy from Chicago who says he's been calling you for a week." "He has." "You gonna talk to him?" "Nope." Danny leaned against the toolbox. He was 51, and he'd been putting his lunch in the same dented cooler for a decade, and he'd known Ethan Carter for 11 years without ever once suspecting a thing. "Can I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "You own this place." Ethan laughed, a real one, the first in a month. "No, Danny. Bill owns this place. I've got a W-2 like you, and I get the same 14 cents a mile." "But you could own it." "Yeah, I suppose I could." "Then what the hell are you doing under a Cessna on a Saturday?" Ethan looked up at the airplane above him, a 172 with a tired magneto and a hairline crack and a baffle that nobody would have caught but him. "Because that thing's going to have a family in it Tuesday," he said. "And I'd like it to come back." Danny nodded slowly. "Yeah," he said. "All right." I went back to his bench, and that was the end of it. And Ethan Carter went on working at that shop for 4 more years without a single one of those men ever treating him differently, which was in the end the only actual perk he ever got out of any of it. The lawsuits came the way Alan Pruitt said they would, 411 of them in the first year. Ardent settled 396 without contesting liability because Ethan had put it in the minutes, and the minutes were binding, and there had been nothing anybody could do about it after that. The number when the accountants finally stopped counting was $148 million. The stock dropped 9% in a week and took 11 months to come back. "You want the honest assessment?" Prewitt asked him in the hallway after the fourth quarter call. "Always. That was the most expensive act of decency in the history of this industry." "How's the network compliance rate?" Prewitt made a face. "You know how it is." "Say the number, Alan." "Overrides on locked assignments are down 96%. Linked minor separations are," he checked his phone unnecessarily because he had it memorized, 11. 11 system-wide in 12 months. All 11 documented, all 11 consented in writing, all 11 compensated. From 682. From 682. And departure time. Up 9 seconds. Ethan smiled. "We estimated 11. "We overestimated," Prewitt said sourly. "That happens when you build the model to lose." Grace Okoye settled for an amount she never disclosed to anybody, including her pastor. She used part of it to fix the cracked window in the kitchen, and part of it to hire a lawyer for the custody hearing, which she won in the spring permanently, and the rest of it went into an account with Nia's name on it that Grace refused to touch even the year the furnace went out. She and Ethan talked on the phone twice a year after that. Christmas and the first week of March, which neither of them ever explained to the other. Nia Okoye wore that purple backpack until the 4th grade, at which point the shoulder strap finally gave out entirely, and Grace found her granddaughter at the kitchen table with a needle and a spool of heavy thread and a look of tremendous concentration. "Baby, we can get you a new one." "No, we can't," Nia said without looking up. "This one's from a girl whose mom died. You can't just get a new one of that." Gregory Hale did not work in aviation again. He took a job managing a distribution warehouse in Joliet for about 60% of what he'd made before, and for the first 8 months he told people he'd left the airline. And then one day, a kid on the loading dock recognized him from the video, and by the end of the shift, everybody knew. He was fired from that job too, not for the video, for something else a month later that he genuinely hadn't done. That was the week he wrote the letter. It came to Wilmington in a business envelope with a return address printed by a home printer, and Priya read it and brought it in without a word, exactly like the other one. It was 4 pages, and 3 of them were bitter, and Ethan read all 4. "I want to tell you something you probably don't want to hear," the last page said. "I'm not sorry the way you'd want me to be. Some days I am. Some days I'm at the warehouse at 5 a.m., and I think about how I drove 40 miles in an ice storm for a woman's wheelchair, and nobody wrote an article about that, and I get so angry I have to sit in my truck. But my son is 11. He asked me last month why I don't work at the airport anymore, and I told him the truth. All of it. I told him I moved a man because the man couldn't hurt me, and he said, 'Did you say sorry?' And I said yes, and he said, 'Then it's okay.' And I had to go outside, Mr. Carter, because it is not okay, and he's 11, and someday he's going to be standing at a podium with a line behind him, and somebody's going to be looking up at him, and I need him to be better than his father was. And the only way I know how to do that is to keep telling him the true sentence even when it costs me. So I'm going to keep saying it. That's all I've got. I'm not asking you for anything." Ethan wrote back, 2 lines. "Mr. Hale, the true sentence is the whole job. Keep saying it. E.C." Then he called a man he knew who ran a regional freight operation in Rockford, and he did not mention Gregory Hale's name, and he did not need to, because he asked a very specific question about a very specific opening and hung up. Hale got the call 3 days later. He never knew where it came from. He worked there 9 years and retired from it, and he was by every account of every person who worked under him, the most stubbornly fair supervisor any of them ever had, and none of them ever understood why he lost his temper exactly once a year, always in March, always about a seat assignment. Victoria Reynolds never sent another letter. She stepped down the way she said she would. She did not resurface with a book or a podcast or a foundation with her name on the letterhead. For 2 years, there was simply nothing at all, which surprised everybody, including her. Then a paper came out of a public health working group in Denver on continuity of caregiver presence for pediatric patients in transit. A small, dry, unglamorous piece of work about how often children in medical transport get separated from the adult responsible for them and what it does to them and what it costs. The lead author was Dr. Claire Reynolds. The funding line at the bottom credited an anonymous donor. Ethan read it in a hotel room in Phoenix and did not tell anyone ever that he'd recognize the amount. Danielle Price made purser in her 5th year. She flew for another 2 decades, and somewhere in there she developed a habit that new crew found strange and then eventually copied without knowing why. When she had to deliver bad news to a passenger, she never crouched. She knelt, or she stood, or she sat in the empty seat across the aisle, never the crouch. A 23-year-old asked her about it once on a red-eye out of Seattle. "There's a technique they teach you," Danielle said. "Get low, soften the voice, make them feel taken care of while you take something away from them. It works great." "So why don't you use it?" Danielle folded a blanket. "Because a man told me once I'd carry it longer than I thought," she said. "And he was right, and I'd rather carry this." They went back to Charleston every March. Same weekend, same street, same live oaks. The people in the blue house got used to them and eventually started expecting them, and by the 3rd year, there was a pitcher of tea on the porch, and the woman who lived there, a widow named Eileen, who taught piano, would just leave the side gate unlatched. The year Lily turned 14, she came down the walk and found her father sitting on the church steps by himself, turning something over in his fingers. "Dad?" "Hey. What's that?" He held it out. A small brass horse worn shiny on one side. "Is that from the letter? You remember that?" "I remember everything about that," Lily said, and sat down beside him. "You've had it 5 years. 4.5. That's 5. Ethan closed his hand around it. "You want to know something," he said. "I almost didn't do it." "Do what?" "Any of it, that morning." He looked out at the parking lot. "I sat in 28E with a phone in my hand and I thought about just going. Landing, getting you to Charleston, filing a complaint on a website like everybody else does. I had my thumb on the screen for about a minute and a half." "Why didn't you—" "Because I kept thinking about your mother in row 31, Ethan said. "And I thought if I don't do it today on the one day it happened to the one guy in the whole system who can stop the airplane, then it never gets done. Not ever. And that's not a chance, sweetheart, that's a duty. And there's a difference, and I only figured it out at about minute 89. Lily was quiet. "Do you ever wish you'd just gone?" "Every March," Ethan said. "For about 10 minutes. "And then what?" "And then I think about a 7-year-old in row 33 who learned not to make a sound," he said. "And the 10 minutes are over." At 19, Lily Carter took a summer internship at Ardent Group and lasted 6 weeks before she quit and went to work at the shop in Rockford instead, which caused approximately as much trouble in her family as anybody could reasonably want. At 24, she took her seat on the board. At 29, she was elected chair, and she came into her first meeting carrying a leather folder that had been her father's, and she set it on the table, and before the first agenda item she said this: "There's 4 paragraphs in our manual that everybody in this room calls Policy 12. My father wrote them after my mother got moved to row 31 on the last good day she had. I've read them about 1,000 times. And I want to tell you what I figured out about them, because I think everybody in this company has it backwards, including me, until about a year ago." 9 people waited. "Policy 12 isn't a rule about seats," Lily said. "It's a rule about what happens in the 6 seconds when somebody in a uniform looks at somebody in a jacket and decides what they're worth. That's the whole thing. Everything else is paperwork." She opened the folder. "So here's how I'd like this board to work. Every meeting first item before the money, somebody reads out how many times we did it last month. Out loud, not a slide. Out loud by a person with a mouth. Somebody at the far end said, 'That's going to be an uncomfortable 90 seconds every quarter.'" "Yes," Lily said. "That's the point of it." Ethan Carter died on a Tuesday in November at the age of 78 in a hospital in Rockford with his daughter's hand in his and grease still under 2 of his fingernails from a magneto he'd been working on the week before, because he had never in his life understood the concept of stopping. The funeral was in Charleston in the small white church, and it was standing room, and then it was not even that, and people ended up out on the grass under the live oaks in the heat. A retired flight attendant flew in from Denver. A 91-year-old woman came up from Redford Township, Michigan in a wheelchair, pushed by a woman in her 30s who worked in pediatric neurology and who had in her purse, for reasons she could not have explained to anybody, a shoulder strap from a purple backpack. A man in his 80s who'd once run a distribution warehouse in Joliet stood in the back and did not speak to anyone and left before the last hymn. Lily gave the eulogy. It was 4 minutes long and she'd written it on an airplane. My father was the chairman of a company that owns 211 aircraft, she said, and he never once let anybody put his name on a wall. I asked him why about 100 times, and he gave me 100 different answers because he was avoiding the question. She looked down at the folder on the lectern. So about a year before he died, I asked him one more time and I told him he had to answer it straight, and he did. He said, "Sweetheart, the day they stopped that airplane, everybody in that cabin found out what I was, and every single one of them changed how they talked to me inside of 4 seconds." He said, "That's the part nobody ever writes about. They didn't get better. They just got scared." Lily's voice held. Everybody there said afterward that they'd expected it not to, and it did. And then he said the thing I'm going to leave you with. He said, "The seat was never the point, Lily. Anybody will treat you well once they find out what you can do to them." What I wanted to know, the only thing I ever wanted to know, the thing I paid for with your first flight, and I'm sorry about that until I die, is what they do when they thought I was nobody. She closed the folder. He got his answer, she said, and then he spent 42 years making sure the next person wouldn't have to ask the question. And that is the true measure of any man alive, not the seat he's given, not the name on his card, not the room that stands when he walks in, but what he does on the morning. The whole world looks at him and decides he is